Hi, hello, and welcome back to the Strategic Magic Podcast. I'm your host, Blue, and I'm a business astrologer here to help you use astrology to start, grow, and scale your online business. Today's episode is super exciting because we are talking all things Venus retrograde, and specifically how you can use this transit to ensure that your business actually thrives and not just survives and gets by. So if you're interested in learning more, keep listening. I gotta tell you, retrogrades are quickly becoming some of my favorite transits because it really is this heightened period of time where we really get to immerse ourselves into particular planetary energy. And this is really cool, especially if you have a placement that kind of struggles with this planet, or if you personally feel like I'm not quite sure how to work with it or connect to it or put my own spin on things, then a retrograde is a really good time to get reacquainted with the energy of that planet. And as the title suggests, we are talking all about Venus retrograde. So if you are listening to this, then perhaps it is Venus retrograde at the time of this episode being published, or maybe it's coming up around the corner. Either way, we're going to be breaking down exactly what Venus retrograde is and how you can work with it, no matter where it's happening in your particular chart and how it's unfolding. So first of all, what exactly is Venus retrograde? So retrogrades themselves are a period of time during the year when a planet retrogrades, or it literally moves abnormally to how it typically does. Retrogrades are also really cool because they are the times when a planet is the closest to the Earth as it will be. So a lot of times you'll often hear people talk about retrogrades as planets going on pause, or they're moving backwards. They're literally revisiting previous signs that they've been in, which is true, but it's also a time where you can immerse yourself more deeply into the energy of a particular planet, which is really cool. So every planet except for the sun and the moon retrograde at some point during the year. You know, the fear mongering around like retrogrades being this really scary time is actually normal. I like to think of it as a regular planetary maintenance. It's just a way for all of the planets to do their thing. All of them need to retrograde at some point. And the reason why the sun and the moon do not retrograde, if you are new here, is because they are the luminaries. They bring light to the daytime and nighttime sky, respectively. So these planets don't move backwards, but they do have a heavy impact when it comes to things like eclipses or even new and full moons. The sun and the moon are always pretty active in those. So there is a lot of time for all of the planets to have their regular maintenance. For this episode, we're going to be talking specifically about Venus and Venus retrograde. In order to first understand what is coming up with Venus retrograde, first we have to really dig into understanding Venus's nature and what it represents. So Venus is a nocturnal and feminine planet, and it's also one of our personal planets, meaning that it holds a lot of regard to how we may personally orient ourselves around certain themes. Venus is, I think, best known for being the planet of attraction. It is represented by the things that you are attracted to and what you find attractive. And it also rules over Taurus and Libra. And Pisces also has exaltation here, meaning that Pisces has a special place in Venus's heart and eye. It loves to be there. Another way to think about Venus is that it deals with the pleasure of life. So all things that are beauty, ease, creativity, the joys and pleasures of life can be represented by Venus. When it comes to a Venus retrograde, similar to other planets like Mercury and Saturn, which I've covered those retrogrades in previous episodes of the podcast if you want to go check those out. Venus retrograde also can happen multiple times a year. Really just depends. So when it comes to Venus retrograde in particular, there are certain themes that are going to be shifted around this time. The first major theme are relationships. So Venus rules over relationships quite literally the way that we connect with ourselves and with other people. And so during Venus retrograde, you may find that this is a time when you're really thinking about relationships, in particular relationships to other people. This may be a time when those relationships are deepening, where there are opportunities for you to get closer to particular places. And I want you to not just see relationships just as romantic, but all forms of relationships can connect back to Venus. So really considering, are there relationships that you're thinking about deepening or shifting in some way or evolving? Maybe it is romantic relationships, and really thinking about what your values are. That's another theme of Venus. Are they being represented accurately within this particular relationship, or is it time to cut the cord, to end this relationship and to create space for new ones that are more aligned to your values, to your preferences, to your attraction and types of attraction to come in instead? Creativity is also another major theme of Venus. Like I said, Venus represents the pleasures in life, right? And creativity is a big one, because without creativity, it's like, what is the joy of living? Are we just here to go to work and to fulfill our obligations? No, we're all of us, I think, at a very core level, have a deep desire for things to be beautiful, to be magical, to be whimsical in some way. We want to feel that spark and that inspiration. And Venus is here to guide us in that way, to help us uncover what is that particular thing that is sparkly and shiny and exciting to us, and how can we create more space to do that thing or to center it more in our lives. During Venus retrograde, you may find that creativity is actually a really healthy outlet for retrograde actions and feelings to be channeled into. Something that you may want to consider is that, is there a particular creative form that you may find yourself gravitating to or thinking about a lot during Venus retrograde? For example, if you were a painter earlier in your life, maybe you painted all through childhood, and as you became an adult, life happened and you just let painting kind of go to the wayside. Creating more time to go back to painting, to revisit this identity of being a painter, and to be in the action of actually painting can be a really healthy outlet for Venus retrograde. So you may want to consider, are there certain modes of creativity that you find yourself wanting to return to during this time? Another major thing that Venus represents is aesthetic. Now, this is a controversial topic within astrology, and as a traditional astrologer, my stance is that aesthetics are, if we're talking about a personal, like how you present yourself out into the world and like what you should dress yourself as or do your makeup as, etc., then that is first house territory. That is the area of your rising sign, because the first house is the house that represents the self. So if you have Venus in the first house in your natal chart, this will play a stronger, more significant role for you when it comes to like aesthetics or even the desire to change how you look in some way. But I see Venus solely like by itself outside of the first house being more like decoration rather than aesthetics. So this may be the particular way that you do your hair or do your makeup. If we're talking about like the aesthetics of how you're presenting yourself out into the world, it's like the smaller details, but it's not the main driving force or the core essence of like how you are presenting yourself. So when it comes to Venus retrograde, aesthetics are always going to be something that rise up, this like itch, this urge to change your appearance, to literally change how you look, to make a shift in some way, which makes sense. Retrograde nature is to revisit, to reemerge, to embrace the nature of the as I've talked about in previous episodes. So I would definitely say that this is a really good time to make or play with the possibility of non-permanent aesthetic changes. So I'm not talking about things that are permanent surgeries or even like permanent hair dyeing, right? Like things that are irreversible. Venus retrogrades are not the time to be playing around with that. Of course, we all have free will. You're welcome to do what you want, but a more opportune time would be when Venus is direct, if that is something that you've been thinking about. But another way that you can play around with this, making a non-permanent aesthetic change, maybe like introducing or experimenting with a style or an aesthetic that you've had in the past. Maybe if you have clothes in your closet that you haven't worn in a while, this might be a really good time to bring them out, to try them back on, to see how they fit. Maybe you need to restyle them to fit your body and how you present yourself currently to better match like the aesthetic of what you're going for. But things that are going to be more permanent changes, Venus retrograde is not the time to be playing around with that stuff. So aesthetics, creativity, relationships, these are some of the more common themes that can emerge during Venus retrograde. You definitely want to see and focus in on your particular Venus placement. So what sign is your Venus in? Paying special attention to if it's in the same sign as the sign that Venus will be currently going retrograde in. It definitely means that this is going to affect you a lot deeper, as well as the house that it's in. That's also going to play a role because the house themes represent different areas of life. So Venus and Venus retrograde may not be impacting your desire to change how you physically appear, but it may shift how you want to appear in relationship to other people or other areas of your life. For example, a general rule of thumb when it comes to Venus retrograde is that this is a time for changes to emerge within your relationships, your business, your finances, your creative life, but this is not the time to start anything new. The nature of retrogrades is to revisit what already exists. So no matter what planet is retrograding, a good rule of thumb is to put a pause on initiating or starting anything new and waiting until the planet in question, or the planets, if we're talking about multiple retrogrades happening at once, are all direct, because direct energy gives you more of that green light to move forward and to have things come out in the way that you're expecting. So kind of going back to the aesthetic example that I was talking about, right? Let's say you've been really thinking about making a particular aesthetic change, like getting a piercing, right? That's always a really fun one, especially if you have like Martian influence with your Venus, meaning that your Venus is ruled by Aries or Scorpio. They're always something that comes up. At least for me, I have an Aries Venus. So that's usually something that comes up around this time for me, the itch, if you will, to get something pierced. Anyway, piercings can be it is body modification, right? We're talking about like pain and prickly things and all things Martian ruled there. So would I personally get a piercing during Venus retrograde? Not if I can help it, because there are higher potentials for things to go out wrong. Maybe like the swelling and the healing process from getting that piercing isn't what I expected it to be, and that creates some unforeseen challenges. It's not necessarily about the act itself, but just considering that along the way or even after the fact, there may be hiccups or challenges that I am not expecting that connect back to that particular change. So it's just something to think about and consider. This isn't meant to be super restrictive, but instead it is meant to be a way for you to make more informed decisions based on the energy of the transits that are going on currently in the sky or are upcoming. So you better know how to navigate them. In general, Venus retrograde is a really great time to reconsider these particular areas of your life. Are they holding up to your standards? Are they necessarily moving in the direction that you want them to? And are there certain changes that you can consider making in the future? Venus retrograde and retrogrades in general offer an opportunity for you to consider what those changes can look like before taking action on them. It's having that necessary pause before moving forward and jumping to an action. And also the energetic reminder that we don't always need to be at go. In fact, we all need to have a period of pause or a time when we are simply just in the state of being in order to really know how to move forward. So with all that being said, how can your business actually thrive and not just survive during Venus retrograde? Like I mentioned before, retrogrades are not meant to be restrictive. We all have free will. You're welcome to do whatever it is that you want to do. But if you really want to make the most out of Venus retrograde, it is so important to first of all, get to know your personal Venus placement. This is incredibly helpful. So understanding within your personal chart where you have Venus placed is going to give you a better sense and understanding of how this Venus retrograde may impact your personal life and therefore impact your business and how you're able to show up. If, for example, you have Venus in the first house and it's in Pisces, it may be impacting you a little bit more than, say, if you have Venus in the 12th house and it's in Virgo. It's just going to be a different kind of playing field there. The second thing that I would suggest is really understanding Venus's nature, understanding the ways that Venus wants to operate. And this kind of goes hand in hand with understanding your personal placement because planetary condition is so important. So I want you to think of it like this. Venus's nature is to be flighty and to be flirty and unrestrained. It does its best work when it's not confined, when it's able to move instinctually and intentionally in the direction that it feels like going. It's very emotional in that way and emotionally driven. Thinking about the planets that Venus rules, Taurus and Libra, right? These are very intentional signs. They do best when they're able to move with their instincts. And then also thinking about the sign that Venus is exalted, it does its best work in. Pisces is the ultimate melting the barriers and doing its own thing kind of sign. Also taking into consideration where Venus is detriment and fallen, so Scorpio and Aries, respectively, because of that Martian nature, it's at odds with Venus and how Venus naturally wants to express itself, because Mars does better in being confined and being restricted and in moving more aggressively than Venus's nature is. So understanding this and how this energy naturally plays in your chart gives you a really good sense of how Venus retrograde may play a role for you during this particular retrograde. Now, when it comes to business astrology, Venus is ruling over finances and also creativity. I would say more like personal finances because Mercury rules over commerce in general. So these are going to be areas that you want to pay attention to when it comes to how Venus retrograde will impact your business. I would say that the best areas to kind of channel this energy into are with your business aesthetics, your branding, maybe your marketing, but a little less so, right? In general, retrogrades are a really good time for you to slow down and take stock of what actions you've done thus far to make a review of what's actually happening. Retrogrades in general, no matter what planet is actively retrograde at that time, it's a really good opportunity for you to review your business and to prepare to make data-driven decisions. I also have another episode where I talk about how to do that, so go check that out after this. But retrogrades are a really fantastic time to take stock of what's actually working in your business, what feels good, what is in alignment, and what's moving you closer to your actual goals versus what's not, what's leading you away from that. So I would say that Venus retrograde is a really good time to consider how you're growing in the areas of your aesthetics and your branding, how you are presenting yourself out into the world, how you can use what it is that you find attractive as a major point in selling your services and making your business not just interesting and attractive to your potential clients, but also translating the fact that they need to be working with you versus other people in your niche. And again, kind of going back to what I was talking about before, making and playing around with non-permanent changes in these areas can be a really good way to shake up your business branding or just your business aesthetic. Again, this is not the time to introduce or start new ideas or to initiate any action behind them. If they do come up, I always advise my clients to just take note of them and revisit them once the retrograde period has passed. But it is a really good time to revisit maybe older ideas that you have. Maybe there is like a dedicated journal or Notion or Google Doc that you just jot like random ideas in. Venus retrograde is a really good time to go back and actually look at those notes, see what is still resonating and what isn't, and then making the very difficult decision to even delete or erase or to let go of ideas that you just know are not going to be a good fit. So some things to keep in mind during Venus retrograde. What have you been feeling stuck or uninspired by? Has it been your branding, your marketing, your aesthetics? Maybe you haven't updated them in a while, okay? I'm saying this to me very loudly because I have been using the same pictures on most of my things since, maybe 2021. And I don't look like that anymore. So that's actually a really good thing for me to consider during Venus retrograde. Another question you might want to ask yourself: where does your creativity play a role in growing and improving your marketing and your branding? Can you give your creativity a job, just like everything else? Now, too much of anything is not good, right? And as much as I enjoy structure, and every business needs structure, and that is something that I work a lot on with my clients, creativity is also needed. And seeing your business as a creative endeavor can be really healing, especially during Venus retrograde. So I want you to consider these questions and how you can best channel the energy of your particular Venus placement in order to make the most out of this Venus retrograde. If you'd like to get even more personalized guidance on how to make Venus retrograde work for you, then I want to invite you to work with me inside of my one-on-one program, Private Astrologer. All the information on the program, as well as how you can apply for a sales call, can be found in the show notes of this episode. So go and check that out. I can't wait to see you on a sales call and in the next episode. Bye.